a stand as you are able for our opening hymn, number 505, Sweet Hour of Prayer. You may be seated. I won! I won!
Kim, what did you win?
Taylor Swift tickets tomorrow at Madison Square Garden.
I can't keep up with Travis, but isn't she in Singapore? I mean, she's not supposed to have another U.S. date until autumn.
It's a special last-minute edition. You can't buy tickets, only win them, and I won too.
That's amazing!
Want to go with me? I know you're a Swiftie.
Yes, well, no, tomorrow? No, can't.
You can't?
I've got a lot on my plate. I'm just way too busy. I cannot come to see Tay-Tay. Don't trouble me now. I am busy with life. There's no time for her now. I have far more commitments than you or anyone. Pray hold me excused. I cannot come. I cannot come to Beckwood. Don't trouble me now. I am married or wife. I am not me or now. I have fields and commitments that cost a pretty sum. Pray hold me excused. I cannot come.
Bummer, right? But we understand. We've had moments when we were given an unexpected opportunity, but after weighing it against our to-do list, obligation wins and we miss out. There's nothing wrong with being true to your word and honoring your obligations. Indeed, scripture encourages us to never swear by heaven or earth, but to simply let our yes be yes and our no be no. We don't want to be the kind of person who cannot be relied upon. However, there were times when exceptions can and perhaps should be made. For example, in the show The Good Place, one of the main characters, Chidi, a professor of ethics, shows honoring his word to the rigorous lengths. We learned, for example, that he missed being with his mother on the day of her emergency back surgery because he had previously promised his landlord's nephew to help him program his phone that day. How do we know when it's okay to change plans and when we need to honor our commitments? Perhaps when we consider the impact of our decision on our relationships. In this sacred season, we're practicing creating space in our lives for what and who is most important to us. Will you join me in prayer, praying the words in bold? God of the present, our cluttered lives are filled with difficult choices.
Help us find room for you.
We want to honor our commitments and live out our values. Help
us to make room for you.
in the midst of competing priorities, we are unsure of how to choose connection.
Let us make room for you. Amen.
You may be seated.
know the story of the tortoise and the hare? Once upon a time, a hare, an animal similar to a rabbit, was boasting about how fast she could run. I am the fastest animal in the forest. No one can run faster than me. A tortoise, an animal similar to a turtle, was tired of the hare's bragging and said, I bet I can get somewhere faster than you. Let's race and I'll prove it. The hare thought this sounded like fun and agreed to race the tortoise. The fox, who consented to judge the race, marked the distance and with a bark started the race. The sweetie hare was soon far out of sight. As she hopped through the forest, she saw some friends on the sidelines cheering her on, and she stopped to talk. Once the tortoise was back in view, the hare said farewell and hopped off again. A bit later, the racetrack went by her house. She was feeling hungry, and not seeing the tortoise behind her, stopped in for some lunch. When the tortoise approached, the hare said farewell and hopped off again. A bit later, tired and full, she decided to lie down and take a nap until the tortoise caught up. She was sleeping deeply when the tortoise slowly and steadily approached and then walked by. She stayed peacefully asleep until she heard the animals cheering in the finish line for the tortoise. She hopped as fast as her legs could carry her, but she could not make up the distance, and the tortoise crossed the finish line. Some say the story celebrates industriousness and hard work over talent. Slow and steady wins the race. Others say it cautions against laziness and idleness. Most, but not all versions, celebrate with the tortoise and critique the hare.
So in past weeks, I've invited you to reimagine these stories in a way that is more in line with the gospel. But instead of retelling the story, I want us to take the same story just as it was and think about what other lessons might be learned. So we can probably agree that bragging is unpleasant, but it's not necessarily a bad thing to know what you're good at. The hare knew that she was fast. She could have easily crossed the finish line first, but instead she chose to spend time with friends, she ate with her family at home, and she rested. The tortoise, albeit slower, did win the race because the tortoise's singular focus was crossing the finish line first. No visits with friends, no lunch with family, no rest. What if the moral of the story is that we're all going to cross the finish line eventually, and maybe winning isn't everything? Maybe the quality of our lives, what we do between the start and the finish line, maybe that's what's truly important. And there is time to stop and smell the roses.
Our scripture comes from the Gospel of Luke. Chapter 14 opens with Jesus at a Sabbath dinner hosted by a local religious leader. While he's there, a man comes seeking healing, and Jesus poses the question of whether it is lawful to heal on the Sabbath. When his question is met with silence, he heals the man, saying, "If one of you has a child or an ox that has fallen into a well, will you not immediately pull it out on a Sabbath day?" Dinner with Jesus turns even more awkward as he criticizes people's seating choices and then critiques his host's guest list. This is where we'll join the story, which dovetails into a parable about a banquet, the parable upon which our interlude song "I Cannot Come" is based. Reading from the book of Luke, chapter 14, verses 12 to 24. Jesus said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your siblings or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return and you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." One of the dinner guests, on hearing this, said to him, "Blessed is anyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God." Then Jesus said to him, "Someone gave a great dinner and invited many. At the time for the dinner, he sent his enslaved servant to say to those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is ready now.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I have bought a piece of land, and I must go out and see it. Please accept my apologies.' Another said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to try them out. Please accept my apologies.' Another said, 'I have just been married, and therefore I cannot come.' So the enslaved servant returned and reported this to the host. Then the owner of the house became angry and said to the enslaved servant, 'Go out at once into the streets and lanes of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' A while later, the enslaved servant returned and said, 'Sir, what you ordered has been done, and there is still room.' Then the host said, 'Go out into the roads and lanes and compel people to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those who were invited will taste my dinner.'"
My first Mother's Day as a pastor, I woke up feeling awful. I downed some Mucinex, which I had never had before. Do not take an untested, untried medication before you try to lead worship. But I did. I went to work and I tried to lead worship. I'm really thankful that this is in the days before everything was recorded, because I was a hot mess. Literally, I got home and I had 104-degree fever. Afterwards, the chair of the Pastor Parish Relations Committee asked why I hadn't called her that morning and said that I was sick and I couldn't come to worship. And I told her it's because I didn't think I could. Not only was it Sunday, but it was Mother's Day, which in that congregation was a big Sunday. And I had this overwhelming sense of obligation to be there. I thought I was doing the right thing by showing up. But in truth, my priorities were really messed up. I put my health and the health of everyone in attendance second. I didn't know that at that time, but after the pandemic, like I am mortified that that was the choice that I had made. But it's not the only time that I messed up and my priorities were misaligned. My first year as a pastor was also the year of friends getting married. So Reg and I got married in May, Neha and Charles got married in June, Aaron and Jesse got married in November, Josh and Laura got married in November. These were dear friends from high school and college. They are friends that I'm still in contact with, still see. But other than my own, I attended none of the weddings. Now, I know that for me, 2008, it was a big year. Our household experienced all of the major life stressors. We had the death of a parent, graduated from law school, got married. I started a new job, bought a house. Like there were lots of things happening. I cannot come to your wedding. Don't trouble me now. I had a lot of good reasons to say I can't come. But the primary reason I didn't go was because of work. I had 4 Sundays off per year. And since I had to travel to each one of these weddings, it would have eaten up every weekend I had off. Now, I can't tell you what I actually did on those 4 weekends I had off. I just know I didn't go to these weddings, and I still think about that. Now, I probably use them to see family, which is not a bad priority, but it is something that I felt. And over time, I found myself getting resentful of people who had the freedom to do whatever the heck they wanted on weekends. People who are like, oh, it's a 3-day weekend, I'll be away. Or for whom church was an infrequent choice. A majority of my job seemed to be that I had to convince people that it was worth coming to church, that it was worth making church a priority, that I was worth listening to. It was not a great dynamic, not healthy, not helpful. Because it made me the center of something that isn't actually about me. It made people's relationship with God and God's church about trying to convince people that it was worth coming. And it also really disregarded the people who are not paid to be here on Sunday. And yet you're here on a day where you lost an hour of sleep. People who attend church, who get here earlier in the morning than I get here, and people for whom this has been your church for a long time before I arrived and who will be here a long time after I leave. That's been true in every congregation I've served. I had a professor who in seminary who really liked anytime we were talking about like, oh, who are we as a pastor and what is our role in worship? He would pat the table and look us in the eye and say, it's not about you. You are here to help people connect with God. Again, a lot of this, it was my first year of ministry. I was 28 years old. I had a lot to learn. Still have a lot to learn. But at 28 years old, I was resenting other people for the choices they were making, but it wasn't actually about the choices they were making. I was upset with myself. I was upset with myself for prioritizing work and missing out on once-in-a-lifetime events with people I loved. Hospice worker Bronnie Ware, she writes and reflects on the regrets of the dying. And she talks about the top 5 regrets. She has a book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And she shares this work in the hopes that we might make different choices so that we have fewer regrets at the end of our lives. And the theme throughout all 5 seemed to be this idea of misaligned priorities. People didn't say, you know, I really shouldn't have taken those days off, or, that vacation, I really should have been at work instead. Like, that was not what people were thinking at the end of their lives. They regretted not giving enough time and attention to their relationships, to family, to friends, even their relationship with themselves. In terms of priorities, there was once a guest preacher on one of those Sundays I had off who gave a sermon about time. She brought in this container, and she said, the container, this is your time on earth. So you need to decide how to fill it. And she had these really big rocks, and then she had some pebbles, and she had some sand. And she said, okay, the most important things in your life, these are the rocks. They're big because they're important. And the least important things is the sand. Pebbles are kind of in between stuff. So she invited people to think about how they would label these rocks and pebbles and sand. And then she took her container, put the sand in first, and then the pebbles, and then some of the biggest rocks didn't fit. Oh no. So then she said, okay, we didn't prioritize the big stuff. So she took the same size container, put all the big rocks in first, and then put in the pebbles, and then put in the sand, and ta-da, it all fit. Maybe you're like, Nicolette, why didn't you do that? Where's the container? Where's the rocks? I thought about it. But, and again, it was a Sunday off, so why do I know about this? Because my congregation loved it. They talked about it for weeks. They loved this container. The simple object lesson, prioritize the important things in life, and then you'll have room for everything else. Like, that's really elegant and beautiful. But life is not simple. What if you have everything perfectly arranged, everything's it's balanced, it's perfect, it's all filled up, and then something unexpected appears? Tickets to see Taylor Swift. Well, I don't have room in my jar, I can't do it. Is everything a fixed size, or do things get bigger or smaller over time? Like, when I was in high school, school was like really big and like the most important thing in my jar. And then was it really? I was like, maybe it didn't need to be that important. How do we even know? How do we know what's supposed to be a big rock and what's a pebble? Or in the words of this morning's parable, what is a banquet and what is a cow? How do we know? I look at the excuses that people gave for not attending the banquet. 2 are about work. I have a new piece of land, I need to go see it. I have some new oxen I want to go try out. So those 2 are about work, and we can be like, oh, you shouldn't have work as a priority. But the other one is weird. I just got married. I mean, isn't that the right priority? You're only newlyweds once, like, sorry, honey, I know it's our honeymoon, but I got invited to this banquet. Like, that doesn't seem like that would be the right choice. So then I get caught up in the details of the story, like, why is Jesus mad at this guy who got married? And then I remember, oh, right, it's not actually, this didn't happen. It's a parable. It's a story that is meant to help us think and teach us about something. We remember the context. So Jesus shared this parable in the context of a dinner with religious leaders who think very highly of themselves. They feel they're very important. They've been jockeying for the best place at the table. And he tells them a story about about a different dinner, a different banquet with very different guests. The people who don't attend the banquet are the people with financial security. They have land, they have fields, they have oxen, and they have relationships. They are overcommitted in their lives. Their lives are filled to overflowing. They don't need to come to the banquet, so they decline the invitation. The people who end up coming are the dispossessed, the sick, the lonely, the estranged, the wanderers. They went out on the highways and just said, oh, you're a traveler, you're in between space, come on in. Come on into this place where you will be fed. Come on in, you who really need the banquet. In this parable, Jesus is describing founding a community of faith that is radically different from the one he grew up in. Rather than reward the powerful and give them places of honor, Jesus imagines a faith that welcomes people from the margins. Okay, so this is great for the lowly and the oppressed, right? But we also say that this is a church for all. So where is the incentive to people who are doing well? Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry. I am the water of life. Whoever drinks from me shall never be thirsty. But if you've never been hungry or never been thirsty, what is there for you? These people who have their own food grown in their own fields, why do they need to come to the banquet? Or the one who just got married, there's probably leftovers from the dinner, the wedding feast. They're fine on their own. Part of our communion liturgy evokes Mary's Magnificat. She prays, God has cast down the mighty from their thrones, lifted up the lowly, filled the hungry with good things, and emptied the rich. Now, casting down the powerful and emptying the rich, it's not necessarily punishment. They are actions that are intended to help people receive God. As I said a few weeks ago, the Christian faith really isn't designed for the self-sufficient. It's designed and meant to be a community. The mighty are cast down so that they might realize that human power doesn't mean security, and they might be tempted to seek something greater. The rich are emptied so that they might realize that money isn't everything and seek something deeper. When we recognize our need for connection, our need for community, our need for God, then we're ready to say yes when God invites us to the banquet. The banquet is ready. The table is set. Do you have room in your lives to say yes? I think you do because you're here. How do we help others find room, find a reason to say, yes, I want that. I want that connection with God. I want that connection with community.
In the Spirit, let us travel, open to each other's faith. Let our loves and fears unravel, celebrate God's sweet day. There's a place for deepest dreaming, there's a table much to
A reminder that a timeout is not a punishment. A timeout for like a really overwhelmed child is a time to sit and regain focus. A timeout in a sporting event is a time to let emotions kind of simmer and to be able to think strategically. So we are using our timeout chair, whether here or at home, as a reminder to sit and be still, to gain perspective, to recenter, to find ways to act more thoughtfully. We've used our timeout chair to practice a few different traditional forms of prayer. We have on the Sunday that we talked about giving our burdens to God, we talked about how in prayer we can offer offer the burdens of our hearts to God so that we're not carrying them. Another week, we learned about centering prayer as a way to clear out the clutter of our minds and focus on God. Last week, we spent some time practicing mindfulness as we experienced communion with all of our senses, which was really unfair to the choir who had been smelling the fresh baked bread for like 45 minutes at that point. Today, I want to invite us to use our time out practice to seek God's wisdom in discernment. Choosing priorities isn't always clear and isn't always easy. There are little things that we decide every day. So I invite you to sit in whatever way is comfortable, close your eyes, and I'm going to lead us in a discernment prayer. Holy God, we give you thanks for the gift of discernment, but confess the limitations of our minds. We're not sure of which path to choose. This is a moment. This is a moment, oh God, where we seek your wisdom. I lift before you my question, what I'm uncertain about. Help me remember my values. Help me when my values conflict. Oh God, show me the way. Thank you for your guidance. Thank you for the example of Jesus who sought your guidance through prayer. His prayer echoes through the ages. We hold it in our hearts as we sing to you this version arranged by Mark. Closing hymn is number 359. I invite you to stand as you are able and join in song. being said, beloved ones, may you remain centered in your values. May you be certain of your priorities. May you forgive yourself when they're misaligned, and may you try again. And may you always be flexible enough to say yes to God. Amen.